Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the FanTC Football Podcast with Nick and Cody. I am your co-host, Nick McDonald. That is Cody Barwick. Cody, how are you today?
I'm doing well, man. Almost done with this week. We're recording this on Thursday night, so only one more work day for me, then a nice weekend. So looking forward to that. But how's your week been going so far for you?
It's been going okay, man. Just another July week in St. Louis. It's way too hot and way too humid, so I'm
Of
waiting for
course,
September to come around so that I can go outside once again.
for sure, absolutely. But while everyone is stuck inside because of the heat, make sure to like, comment, subscribe, not only to this video and actually you may be listening on our new platform, Apple Podcasts, because this will be our first official episode that's put out on there. So if you are, make sure you hammer that subscribe button. Leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. Really help us get into their algorithm. But of course, we have Facebook, Instagram, YouTube, Twitter, TikTok, all of the above now. So whatever your favorite platform is, go out there and show us some support. We would really appreciate it. But let's go ahead and roll right into these news and notes, Nick. Obviously, a lot of big things happened around the NFL since we last talked together. We'll skip to this one because I feel like this is kind of the biggest one, but Baker Mayfield got traded to the Carolina Panthers. Let's go ahead and hear your initial thoughts and what you think this means for the fantasy implications on the team.
So real quick on the Panthers themselves, I'd say I would call it an upgrade at the quarterback position. I think he's a clear step up from Sam Darnold just as an NFL quarterback. I mean, most of his numbers as far as yards per attempt, touchdown ratio, interception ratio, anything like that. Baker Mayfield is a better passer of the football than Sam Darnold is through their first 3 or 4 years in the league. But as far as their fantasy impact goes, like for DJ Moore, Christian McCaffrey doesn't really change anything for me. He's already a top 3 pick. You are going to think what you think about him, but I don't really move the needle too much here, to be honest with you. I think Baker, from what I've seen of his pass catchers before, it seems like he sort of spreads the ball around a little bit more, especially in the red zone. He's never had a pass catcher have more than 6 touchdowns in a year. And any of he's started almost 4 full years in the league. So I think DJ Moore owners are going to get a little too hot and heavy at this point, and you're going to see him rise up to the third, maybe even second round. And I'm not biting. I think if he stays where he is, fine. It's a tiebreaker over those other guys like DK Metcalf around him that have quarterback issues. But I'm not moving the needle too much on the pass catchers here.
I agree with you when it comes to the DJ Moore perspective. I do think this moves Carolina towards more of a playoff viable team as opposed to having Sam Darnold as their quarterback going into the year. I've stated on this pod before, I'm someone who just seems to think Sam Darnold can turn it around, but I think it's pretty clear at this point that he is what he is. Honestly, the less he plays, the better for him because he'll probably get a solid backup gig if he just doesn't touch an NFL field.
Yeah.
Whereas if he shows how bad he plays for another year, he may not get that same backup gig.
Yeah.
So maybe good for his long-term career. As far as DJ Moore, I currently own his rights in our mini dynasty league that we have going. I'm have 3 locked in, Austin Eckler, Justin Jefferson, Najee Harris, that no question I'm keeping, and my 4th one's kind of open. I'm still leaning David Montgomery just because of the position availability for me. I won't have a pick till the late 2nd round in that draft,
That's the right decision.
You think that's a bad decision?
David Montgomery is the right pick, but I didn't say that.
Oh, yes. Yeah. David Montgomery's also my only tradable asset if I want to get back into that first round and maybe try and find myself another running back of the future. So that's my David Montgomery. If someone offers me a first in a trade, they could potentially have him, and I'll just keep DJ Moore. But that's just long term. If I can trade him out for someone that I feel more comfortable at long term at running back, I would gladly do that. Like, I love David Montgomery. I'll have him in plenty of fantasy football drafts because he's going where he's going. But in our 4-person keeper, if I could swap him out and throw, even someone like a Breece Hall or a Kenneth Walker, that could be a great running back by the end of the year. I know that's something I would definitely consider doing. So,
no, 100%.
But back to back to Baker. I don't think it makes that big of a difference fantasy wise. DJ Moore, I mean, his breakout. The only thing that's going to be good is Baker should start all the games for the Panthers, which I don't think they've had a quarterback do since Cam Newton X amount of years ago. Which that'll be good for DJ Moore, not having to go through a quarterback carousel, but not anything too crazy for me. Glad it's kind of over with the whole Baker Cleveland situation. Ready for this Deshaun situation to get situated and then move on past all that crap. So sick of the Browns being in the news for
Yeah, I agree.
quarterback drama they put themselves into.
I hope it gets resolved sooner rather than later. It seems like it's not going to be till the last week of July from the reports that I've heard, but we will see. As far as that goes, Carolina, we don't think changes too much as far as their fantasy contributors go. We'll move on here to the Cincinnati Bengals because this is the first part of our AFC North breakdown. Real quick touch on the Bengals as a team, NFL-wise over the offseason. We think they did a really good job. I think they attacked their biggest weakness, which is O-line. Clearly in the playoffs, I mean, it was pretty evident. 9 sacks against the Titans in the divisional round and then 7 in the Super Bowl against the Rams. Sacks allowed, that is. You know, they really had to address this, and they did. They got to 3 new starters out of the 5 that they had before, and they were all quality players as far as they were on their previous teams. So it seems like Cincinnati's done a good job of attacking their biggest weakness. I really like what they did this offseason. You know, teams have Super Bowl hangovers occasionally, but I think they've done a good job to hopefully stem that tide.
I agree with you in regards to them upgrading their offensive line. My biggest concern with the Bengals is, did they peak last year? I mean, getting to the Super Bowl and having a chance to win it in the fourth quarter. I mean, that's really tough to do for young quarterback, relatively young team, young coach, and it's even harder to duplicate that once you've had that success and that's kind of the standard that you're set at. I do agree. I like that what their team is doing. They're really gearing up that offensive line, which really they need to because Joe Burrow can't be hit as much as he was towards the end of last year. And if they can rely on more of a run game with a better O-line, I think that helps them out in the long run. With the Bengals, I mean, I think it's going to be a dogfight between them and the Ravens on this division, and I could see the Bengals, coming out on top. I could also see the Bengals having a couple, struggling just a little bit and, kind of falling closer to that 9-8 and just coming off that Super Bowl hangover a little bit too hard.
Yeah, I mean, they have a great team, but I think their biggest obstacle is the fact that the AFC is very loaded right now with quarterback talent. And, there are a lot of teams at the top that you could see coming out here. So that's probably their biggest hurdle, but we can get into the fantasy aspect of the Bengals real quick. Do you want me to start off with Jason Higgins before we get into any of our discussion here? Okay, so I have a little bit of a piece here on Jamar Chase and T. Higgins that I would like to get the information out to the people because that's what we're all about, right? We are educating masses here. And okay, so real quick hitters here. Jamar Chase last year finished as wide receiver 3. He's coming off the board at 7th overall right now, wide receiver 3 as well. And we are kind of in agreement that this is a little bit too high, and we think that Jamar and T. Higgins themselves should be a little closer. So in games they played last year, Jamar Chase was at 7.7 targets per game. T. Higgins was at 7.8, essentially identical while they were playing together in those games. So Jamar Chase and T. Higgins really were not separated by too much when it comes to their actual stats per game. It's really just their touchdowns that we're looking at here. Jamar Chase ended up with 13. T. Higgins ended up with 6. And in the grand scheme, when you look at something like touchdowns, sometimes they can be repeatable, but when we look at this, we want to see somebody that's being consistently targeted in the red zone. And what we see here is that Jamar Chase had 12 red zone targets and 5 touchdowns, and T. Higgins had 11 red zone targets and 4 touchdowns. So again, extremely similar. What this means is that Jamar Chase hit more home runs, and that is what he's best at. But as we saw in the Super Bowl and really throughout T. Higgins' career, he kind of plays that game as well. So you really don't want to bet on like something like that consistently hitting those 40-plus yard touchdowns because they're not incredibly repeatable. we think that Jamar Chase and T. Higgins should be drafted way closer to each other. I think T. Higgins is probably about 90% of what you can expect of Jamar Chase this year, both coming into Jamar Chase's second year, T. Higgins' third year. And I think that the draft price is just way too big to ignore here. You have Jamar Chase at 7th and T. Higgins at 30th. I'm taking T. Higgins in the 3rd round all day before I'm taking Jamar Chase with my 1st round pick.
Yes, that is the big part for me here is you are spending your 1st round pick on a player that didn't have anywhere near 100 receptions last year. And if you look at a lot of the fantasy wide receivers that are getting taken in the 1st round, they are hyper targeted, very high reception guys. And a lot of times it's because of their receptions that they become viable in those half PPR and PPR leagues over those running backs that you kind of get mixed in with. I was unaware of these statistics until you brought them up to me before we recorded. I think that these statistics are very eye-opening, which is why we want to get this out to the people.
Yeah.
I don't mind if you take Jamar Chase, towards that 1-2 turn. If you can solidify or get a good running back and then grab Jamar Chase with like your 2nd pick if you have the 12th pick in the draft. I like that. I like him as opposed to some of the other wide receivers in that same area. But for me, it's a clear 1 in Kupp, a clear 2 in Jefferson, and then you're starting to kind of get who you prefer after that. And just with these numbers, Jamar Chase just isn't someone that I'm going to take in that 1st round because you're really just betting on a lot of boom weeks, and that's really hard to bet on in fantasy football. Obviously, when it happens, he's a great daily fantasy dart throw almost every week because there's going to be weeks that he wins you the week, obviously. So, but on a week-to-week basis, we look at the targets per game, you look at the overall targets, the catches that they got off of those targets and everything. T. Higgins and Jamar Chase aren't that far apart. I can't draft Jamar in the 1st round. I don't mind him being my 1st wide receiver, but I got to have somebody else on my team that I can really rely on to be extra consistent for me. When it comes to T. Higgins, him in the 3rd round, I love that just because I want a piece of this Bengals offense, especially the passing game. We'll get into Joe Mixon. I love Joe Mixon. I think this is going to be a year he really breaks out. So Higgins or Mixon are going to be 2 of my targets. And then if Jamar slips into a position that I feel comfortable with, I'd happily take him. It's just I'm not going to take him where I can get a difference at running back or, you're splitting hairs between him and like a Stephon Diggs or a Tyreek Hill or Devontae Adams, and you're really calling your shot on something that may end up costing you your league pretty early on if he isn't that same player that we saw in Week 18 in the playoffs.
Exactly.
Or 17 in the playoffs.
We think they're a lot closer than consensus draft opinion does right now. And, I think we both kind of laid it out. You should probably take Higgins at his value over Chase at the moment if the statistics hold as they did last year. Mixon, we can touch on real quick. I don't really think we need to say too much on him because we think he's kind of valued about right. 11th overall, RB7. I'd be okay taking him high as 7th or 8th, but I think he's a solid mid to late 1st round pick, and he should be a really solid fantasy option. Maybe not a league winner, but again, definitely worth the late 1st round pick that he is at right now.
Yeah, he just isn't a very sexy pick. You don't draft him and just be like, man, Joe Mixon, my RB1, I can't wait to dominate this year. But he is a very good fantasy football player. He's a really good running back. I could see him breaking into the top 5 this year amongst running backs, especially. He gets banged up, but he never seems to have a long-term injury, which is very nice at the running back position. But, yeah, we don't have to keep rambling on about him. I love Joe Mixon. That end of the 1st round, if he's still available, I think that he's an easy pickup for your team. Just very consistent. He's not going to be your guy who's going to – he's not a CMC who's just going to absolutely light the world on fire and finishes the RB1, but he could be the RB3 or 4, play 16 out of 17 weeks and – be a very, very strong component in your fantasy championship run. So definitely. I'm a big fan of Mixon going into this year. He's got great value where he's getting drafted.
Yeah, definitely worth a late 1st round pick. And then the last option on this team, really from a fantasy perspective, is Joe Burrow. I think we both like him as a player and honestly a fantasy option, but I think that it's all about ADP when we come to talk about value of fantasy players. So we don't love where he's going right now. He's being valued a little bit highly, probably because of his Super Bowl run and the offensive line upgrades that we've seen. Right now, he's going at QB4, 54th overall in NFC ADP, which is honestly insane to me. I mean, we did a mock draft a little bit ago on ESPN. I ended up drafting Joe Burrow, which was incredibly surprising to me, but I got him in the late 8th round. If you're getting him there, I'm totally fine with taking him because
Love
I
that.
love the offense. But yeah, again, 54th overall. That's early 6th round in 10-team drafts, and maybe even late 5th round in 12-team drafts. So, and this was a 12-team draft. We did the mock in. Yeah, no, I'm not taking Joe Burrow at this spot. Again, I think you want to just kind of wait till the end of this second quarterback tier to take a QB, which is hopefully in the 7th or 8th round for you.
Yeah, absolutely. So, well, we don't have to ramble too much about Joey B. I love Joe Burrow. I think he's a great quarterback. I just love what he did in LSU, and then coming into the NFL, getting hurt, coming back his second year, and I mean you could kind of tell just a flip switched halfway through that second season, and he just started to light the world on fire, which is just really cool to see. It's always fun to see young quarterbacks really come into their own and dominate. So, I love him as a player. In the 8th round, he could be a fantasy football championship level quarterback for you. That's a great deal. Where he's going, kind of in that, mid 5th round, it's just way too high. I mean, they have him as the highest of that second tier. I mean, there's no doubt I'm taking Lamar over him. I would strongly consider taking Kyler over him. And then you have to think about Hurts and Dak and their potential for that running capability that Joe Burrow doesn't really have. So hopefully.
Also, Russell Wilson.
Yeah, we'll talk about him in our next little videos that we do about the AFC West. He's looking pretty pudgy. I don't know if you want to talk about that yet, but
Still a great quarterback. Doesn't matter.
I know. No, yes. I mean, I would take Joe Burrow over Russell Wilson in fantasy football, but yes, he's also in that same tier of just, if you can get Russell Wilson 4 rounds after you get Joe Burrow, like obviously Russell Wilson's the way better value. That's who you should be drafting in fantasy football.
That's our point.
And that's how you're going to win championships. Exactly. But if you can get Joe Burrow in that 8th round, like Nick did in our mock draft, I mean, I feel like that was a real changer for you in that mock draft because I had Tua T as my quarterback, you had Joe Burrow, and the rest of our lineups were both really solid. So, that quarterback position, you don't really think about it too much. A lot of people tell you to completely punt on it, but when you have value fall to you in the draft, you definitely got to snag it up when you can.
Yeah.
Just like Nick did with Joe Burrow. So I would say like Joe Burrow is probably like 6, 7, maybe 8 on my list to draft at quarterback, and there's going to be plenty of leagues where he is taken as the 4th quarterback off the board, which is fine because that just fills a slot for another team and, push Lamar, down the board a little bit further. I would really appreciate it.
Let the value fall, guys. This is going to be the end of our first episode here of the AFC North content. We're going to come at you with the Steelers and the Browns next in our second episode, but we want to say thanks for watching, and I hope you tune into our next video. Cody, you have anything you want to close out with?
No, but we actually have some outro music now as well, so we'll go ahead and play that, and peace out, everybody.